Hello and welcome to Common Censored. I am Lee Camp, the host of Redacted tonight, here with the host of Act Out. I decided to switch it up, Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello, I was about to jump in prematurely.
Because it was so confusing.
I'm very confused.
This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other shit.
You've stuck with other shit 2 weeks in a row, so...
I did?
That's the new norm. I think you need to change it up to
I'm just getting angry.
bullpucky or something.
I'm sorry?
That's a southern term for bullshit.
I don't know that it is.
Bullpucky, yeah. All right, so yes, this is Common Censored. We're on the Popular Resistance Podcast Network. We're free on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Libsyn. We got tons of shit to talk about. We're going to talk, listen, people have been begging us to talk about Buttigieg, so we're going to do some of that. I'm kidding. No one's ever asked for that. I'm also we're going to mention, in the quick news, we're going to mention the impeachment. We're going to mention the attempted arrest of Code Pink activist Medea Benjamin. But then we're going to get deep into Bolivia and several other topics because here's what happened with Bolivia. Is it was so fresh last week that I didn't have all my info. And so we covered it lightly because I don't always know everything. You don't always know everything when it pops off that day. And now I have like way too much info on Bolivia. So
yes, we're awash.
We're awash with info. So but we're going to start with the, because that's a bigger topic, we're going to start with the quick stuff, get it out of the way. Apparently, Buttigieg is winning in Iowa, according to one poll of white guys over 55 who live in Iowa and only eat corn. But here's the thing: is Iowa is 90-some% white people, 90-some%, and so Buttigieg may be winning, but he is winning in a tiny, bizarre little bubble of America, which shows how fucking stupid our primary system is.
Well, not only the primary system, but just the polling. I mean, sometimes they'll tell you exactly who was polled, but oftentimes they'll just say polls show, which makes it sound like, oh, we took a perfect sampling of the U.S. residents and found no, that's absolutely the opposite of what they do.
I remember last election cycle, 2015. If you dug into CNN will reveal who they polled, but you got to click about 14 things. No one ever looks at it, dig through numbers. And I found that almost the entirety of everyone they polled was landlines. And I was like, landlines? Fucking landlines.
For those of you who don't know what that is, that's when your phone's connected to a wall.
By a chain of sorts.
Or like it's connected, sometimes you'd have a cordless phone. But there was still a part of the phone that was connected to the wall, okay?
Do you understand? Like, if it were sewn to your couch, if your smartphone were sewn to your couch, I could do this bit for the next half hour. I really could. I'm really enjoying it. By the way, let's not go too hard on this. My grandma is listening to this podcast on a landline phone right now. So.
Dude, seriously, though, I went to a... Sam, if you're listening, this is about you. I went to a museum, the Smithsonian, because they had like a
landline phone.
Sorry, they had like a little exhibit about Ella Fitzgerald, and there was also a part of the museum that had like technology through the ages of like the U.S., which the U.S. is really young, so it's not really through the ages. It's like the past 150 years. And there was a fucking landline phone in this case, in the exhibit, that was like, oh my God.
Dusty. It was
How
dusty.
do you even know what that was? No one was alive then.
It was
like,
dusty.
it was just such a weird moment. I'm like, shit, things that I used are in a museum now? What the fuck?
I'm pretty sure anyone under like 25 thinks that before 1985, it was just all Atari. Like everything ran on Atari. They don't know what it was, but they know it was something called Atari, and it just.
See, I don't even know what that was, but that's because I didn't play video games.
Oh, well, it was the competitor Nintendo. Anyway, moving on.
This has nothing to do with Bolivia or Buttigieg or anything.
Get into Buttigieg's black people problem.
Yeah. So, it's a manifold black people problem. So recently, as in today, this is Monday, November 18th, the Buttigieg campaign was criticized for using stock photo of a Kenyan woman.
Not Kenyan American.
No, just a Kenyan woman
Just
to
Kenyan.
promote plan to address U.S. racism, which is...
Is it possible he's arguing that this woman in Kenya is a huge fan?
There are so many layers of, like, I don't even know if it's irony, but just, like, batshit weirdness. So basically, like, I mean, and you know, like, you see stock photos, and it's always, like, somebody smiling in a pastel-colored shirt. But if you're running a campaign and you're saying, like, hey, these are people that support me, oftentimes you will use actual supporters because it makes you look better, and they'll be wearing, like, your shirt or whatever.
Sometimes CNN or whatever the fuck will contact these people and want
Right.
to talk to them. And it sounds great if they're like, yeah, I love Buttigieg.
As opposed to a Kenyan woman's stock photo. So basically, and his response was, or his campaign's response was, we apologize for its use and for the confusion it created. It's not confusing. It's just some bullshit.
It's just your fucking... Well, it would be one thing if this were coming from, like, the Obama campaign that had, like, a lot of black support. Whereas...
And he's Kenyan.
Oh, yeah, that too. Whereas, he's not Kenyan. He's of descent.
Sorry. Yes.
But Buttigieg has apparently has like zero support among black people.
Well, and
I was gonna say, as our first three primaries are incredibly white Iowa, incredibly white New Hampshire, and then an actual mixed state, South Carolina, where Buttigieg has like zero support. He's at like 6% or something.
No, he's at like 0.
Well, among black people.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes. So this is another story and this is separate from the stock footage or the stock photo. Sorry, this is another story that came out basically yesterday. So these is a 1-2 punch here, and it's really not a good look. So basically, what happened is that the Buttigieg campaign claimed that there were a lot of pretty high-profile black Democratic officials in South Carolina that were supportive of his campaign and his quote-unquote plan for Black America, which I just like to take a moment and say that's fucking terrifying. Plan for Black America, like sounds very Final Solution. Am I wrong? Like,
well, you made a good point before we started taping that I feel like if a candidate came out and was like, "I have a plan for the Jews,"
yeah,
it would resonate very differently.
You'd be like, "I'll be over here getting the fuck out of this country." That's not. I mean, it's just fucking creepy. So anyway, what happened? 3 in particular. It was Columbia, South Carolina City Councilwoman Tamika Devine, State Representative Reverend Ivory Thigpen, and Johnny Cordero, who's the chair of the state party's Black Caucus, said that they agreed when asked by the Buttigieg campaign to offer their general support for his effort to promote dialogue around racism and racial inequality, which is basically like if somebody asks you, hey, do you think it's a good idea that we address racism? Yes.
Well,
okay.
And like
but
if Trump were to come to you and say, do you think it's a good idea to help needy children? You say yes, but that doesn't mean you're a Trump supporter.
But so basically the Buttigieg campaign then turned this into, oh, these people support the campaign and put their names in an email blast, and basically like, you know, South Carolina black folks love Mayor Pete. So And this is
these people weren't at all Buttigieg supporters, right?
And not only that, but apparently State Rep Thigpen is actually the state co-chair for the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. And he said, quote, I thought I made it clear to them that I was a strong Bernie Sanders supporter, actually co-chair of the state, and I was not seeking to endorse their candidate or the plan. So not only, there's not only like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. No, this guy is the fucking state chair for the Bernie Sanders campaign for 2020, and yet Buttigieg's campaign was like, we'll just take that name and we'll say that you're for us because, you know, we don't have enough black folks over here.
Yeah, we'll just use anything.
We'll just tokenize you.
So we'll wrap this up because we're in the quick news segment, but I think this just points to how stupid our primary system is. The fact that this guy could win Iowa simply because Iowa is so aggressively white and he has a lot of money coming from corporate backers and rich backers. He does not have a lot of money coming from individual donors, so he can even compete in the money race is thanks to the fact that this system is rigged to benefit the rich. And he could win Iowa, and then all the media stories will be Buttigieg is winning, and then he could win New Hampshire, another white state, or come in second, and then he's got this momentum that is unfounded. It's unfounded momentum. It's bought momentum, and it's momentum based on a tiny bubble of white, some Midwest and some Northern Americans.
Yeah.
So let's get into a very short segment on the updates on this impeachment, which is all that our mainstream media covers. You all, if you've listened to more than one episode, know Eleanor's feelings on these things. And no hissing on the podcast. I told you. But a couple of quick things. Roger Stone was convicted on all counts. The mainstream media... Now, Roger Stone is a fucking clown, all right? He's a complete clown. The mainstream media wants you to think that because he was convicted, that somehow means that Russiagate was real or that collusion was real. This guy is a con man, has been a con man from birth, and he was part of the fucking Watergate, all right? He's been around forever doing con man things, and basically what happened was he ran around lying to the Trump administration, trying to tell them he had info on what WikiLeaks was going to release. WikiLeaks had already publicly announced they had Hillary Clinton emails. That was not a secret. The mainstream media wants you to think that this guy had inside knowledge. He had no inside knowledge. He did not speak with Julian Assange, and that's all come out. And what he was convicted of was mainly lying to federal prosecutors because he's a fucking con man and a clown, and he didn't want to admit that he had no information, and he didn't want to admit that he was trying to give information to Trump. And so this is a fucking idiot who was convicted for lying to federal prosecutors. He is not a fucking Russian agent that spoke with Russia, that was colluding with the Trump administration, trying to collude. There's no evidence that WikiLeaks worked with Russia. In fact, Julian Assange said the source was not Russia. And in one of their segments I saw, CNN call one of their fucking idiot panelists, one of the main ones that's on there all the time for the past 20 years, I can't remember her name, called WikiLeaks an arm of the Russian government. Eleanor, I ask you, is WikiLeaks an arm of the Russian government?
I think everything you don't like is an arm of the Russian government.
That is useful.
Which is really super convenient. So my period cramps are actually a Russian plan to destabilize me and keep me from doing the work of justice and freedom in America. So, yeah.
I want to do a segment soon on everything and everyone who's been called a Russian agent, Russian plant, Russian asset at some time. You've got people on the left like Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein. You've got people on the right like Trump, Mitch McConnell, Roger Stone, fucking all of those Republicans. They're all Russian assets, apparently, according to this combination of mainstream media and Hillary's squad.
Well, and this is also...
You've got AOC is a Russian asset. Of course, RT is. Probably Democracy Now.
Well, and this is interesting because this just came out of England. So they've long since said that Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party are Russian assets, but now they're saying there are reports coming out now that the whole Brexit thing was done by right-wing extremists that were controlled by Russia. And it's like, okay, I'm sorry. So you're saying that the left, i.e. Corbyn and the Labour Party, are controlled by Russia, but also the whole right-wing Brexit thing is also Russia. So then you're basically just saying that the entire British government is the Russian government. Like, what the... I mean...
Yep, except for a tiny window of acceptable thought that is not considered Russian. And by the way, guess what? Was connected to a government, an organization that helped rig Brexit or push Brexit one way, helped helped get Trump elected and did it via Facebook and social
Bragged
media.
about it.
Social media, yeah, bragged about it, social media mining, and they were called Cambridge Analytica, a British company with Steve Bannon on the board. They were not a fucking Russian company. Anyway, that's getting off on a side thing. I just want to ask you one last question about the impeachment process, which I know that you don't watch mainstream media, so I know you don't see this. Unfortunately, in the studios where I'm at, it's all over the TVs, and I know that CNN has talked about nothing other than this for the past several months. So my question, and MSNBC, so my question is, do you think these impeachment proceedings, with all their endless coverage, are resonating with anyone across America? Like, is this sitting with people?
I recently put up a post on Instagram that said, so did anybody check in on those kids in cages recently, or is it just all impeachment? And I think that speaks to this whole point. And here's the thing, is that it's not just like the human rights moral issue of paying attention to this 1% sandbox tiff. It's the fact that people don't care. Like, if you ask people, like when I was in West Virginia in late October and I talked to folks, they were like, I don't give a shit.
Right.
I don't like Trump, or, or I voted for Trump and I don't like what he's doing now or whatever. No one gives a flying fuck, because when you can't put food on your table, when you have black lung, when you're literally dying for health care, you don't give a rat's dick what the fuck is going on in DC between the 1%ers on either side of the aisle. It does not matter. And this is the whole point, right? It's to serve as a distraction for the people who have disposable time and money. And for the rest of the people, it's just a way to say, well, I'm sorry, I would have paid attention to your medical issues, but, we've got this impeachment thing going, and I really couldn't spare the time to care about your dying son.
I think it's mainly for people who they're exhausted at the end of the day. They have 5 minutes that they throw on CNN to find out if there's something catastrophic going on in their world, and all they hear about is impeachment, so they figure, oh, that's all it is, and they just turn it off.
But at the same time, people
so they're
know.
not thinking about everything else.
But at the same time, people know that there's more going on. Like, that's the thing. People might be poorly educated in this country, but that doesn't mean that they're stupid. People know that the government doesn't give a shit about them, and they know that this is all just bread and circus. And so for the people, again, who have the time and money to give a shit, this is great. This is like, Sex in the City's back on the air. This is this is great. But
oh my God, if they could just have another sex scandal involved in the middle of this, like, some sort of Russian was
I don't know,
fucking Ivanka Trump.
You let Biden go long enough, that's going to happen. So I think, people know that this is nothing that has to do with them, and at the end of the day, they're going to lose. Regardless of who wins this stupid fucking tit for tat, the people are going to lose, and they know it.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Last quick thing, we just wanted to mention this so as not to skip over it, but I did cover it on Redacted tonight as well. You all, first of all, let me just set it up by saying that a great journalist and a friend of ours named Max Blumenthal was arrested at his house by a D.C. SWAT-style raid where they accused him of a completely false assault charges, probably put forward by the Venezuelan opposition, the pro-coup people, the Guaido people, did this just to get Max arrested and drain his funds, defending himself in court and stuff like that. Well, something very similar happened to another anti-war she's an anti-war organizer. He's an anti-war journalist, I guess, talking, revealing the truth about war. But another one we're friends with named Medea Benjamin, who's a co-founder of Code Pink, and she went to Debbie. She was accused of assault against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the fucking awful human being who helped rig the primary against Bernie Sanders. But of course, that's not the only thing that people hate her for. But she is, one of Hillary Clinton's clowns, and she was doing a pro-Bolivian coup event. Whoever thought a congressperson would have a pro-Bolivian coup event? But she's doing that. Medea and Code Pink activists are there with posters that say no coup, we want peace, that kind of thing. And Medea is then knocked around. By the way, Medea is 5'2", for anyone who's wondering. Is then knocked around by these pro-coup, the same people that were outside the Venezuelan embassy, pro-coup people, and they basically knock her into Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Debbie Wasserman Schultz then screams, "Ow, call the D.C. police." Medea Benjamin then goes home, and they send a SWAT team or a bunch of cops to her house to try and arrest her without a warrant. She then shows them the film of what happened, and they did not arrest her. But this stuff is just designed to make activists and anti-war organizers fear for what they do, fear for their freedom.
Yeah, and I mean, people like Medea Benjamin have had a target on their backs for a long time, so this is just more... It's more of the same scare tactics to get people who are most often the most vocal and the most publicly dissenting to quiet down, to step back, and they're hoping that these sort of techniques will work. But if you've ever met Medea, you know that it won't. And if you've ever met Max, you know that it won't either. In a lot of ways, it only fuels their passion and their fire even more. So good luck, guys. And by guys, I mean the fucking empire.
Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned this before. This will only matter to those of you who hear this in the next day. But I am on a panel with Max. I'm moderating a panel on propaganda with Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, and Margaret Kimberly. All amazing people. All do amazing writing and other things. And that's free, and it is Tuesday night, this Tuesday. So many of you are probably listening to this after that. But if you're not, in New York City, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. The rest of the details are at leecamp.com/schedule.
Is it going to be live streamed?
I don't know about that. I haven't heard anything about a live stream.
Okay.
But yeah, should be very cool. Free event in New York City. Okay, couple other things before we get into Bolivia, which I'm excited to do because I have so much new information for you. But my new book is out for pre-sale and finally here, and it's my Truth Dig. Insert applause and screaming here. Oh my God, it is. But it's my Truth Dig columns, which even if you've read some of them, you probably haven't read all of them, so you probably still enjoy the book.
And there's some stuff in there that isn't from Truth Dig as well.
Yes, there's some extra content as well that's not from Truth Dig, that's never before seen. So anyway, that is, I promise I'll have a better site up soon, but right now it's tinyurl.com/LeeCampBook. So tinyurl.com/LeeCampBook, capital L, capital C, capital B. But I will have it on my website soon. It's also towards the top of my Twitter. It's on my Twitter. So
we'll put that link in the show notes as well.
Yes, link in the show notes. Anyway, here's why you should get it for pre-sales, and this is the last I'll say about it. But it's because it looks good to the publishers. They have they have a limited amount of resources, limited time to promote all of the books they're putting out. So this looks really good if it gets a lot of pre-sales and they think, hey, this is a book worth putting energy behind. And all of a sudden you get a promo person who says, hey, I'm going to help you out and I'm going to get you, interviews and things about your book because they see it as something that's worthwhile. So if you, and I've always said worthwhile and I'm sticking with it. I realize it's worthwhile. I know. I've known since I was 6, but I really like worthwhile. So
it sounds edgy.
it's worth your wild. Like that's so much cool. It's worth your wild. Whatever wild you have in you, it's worth it. To go and grab it under pre-sales right now and help me out in that way. Okay, a couple other quick things. This show is only held together by the duct tape and spittle that you guys donate at patreon.com/commoncensored.
We could really use more duct tape, less spittle.
Less spittle.
Thank you.
We provide the spittle. Patreon.com/commoncensored. Please join up over there. You also get extra content. All of Eleanor's material is at artkillingapathy.com. YouTube.com/momentofclarityshow is my personal YouTube, and then there's the Redacted Night YouTube. And let's see, review us on iTunes, sign up for our email because email is one of the not very suppressed areas that we can communicate. Everything else is getting suppressed. I'm heavily suppressed online. Eleanor is as well. But if you text the word censored to 345-345, you will instantly get signed up to our email list. So please do that, completely free. Okay, shall we move on?
Do it.
Okay, Bolivian coup. Here's all our new information. And some of it we probably gave to you last week, but we were just a little vague on the details. I think I said last week that it was a close election. It really wasn't even a close election. Evo Morales won the vote in Bolivia by over 10 points, which means he wasn't even required to have a runoff. Under 10 points, you have to have a runoff.
Which is why that's part of the reason, because if they could have leaned on the runoff, that leaves them more, they being the right-wing opposition, they could have leaned on that as, but
what do you mean leaned on?
Leaned on as like an excuse to, to do a recount or something like that. But like if it's over that 10 points, then they had to say like, oh well, there's no way that he would win by this much, so that it's illegitimate. It's illegitimate. But if it's under that, then there's like a little bit, like they can kind of like massage it without having to go full on coup. But if it's over 10 points, then they have to just say it's fucking illegitimate. This whole thing's a sham and he's corrupt and da-da-da-da-da.
Right. And here's something else that hasn't really been reported anywhere. Gray Zone, I'm told, is getting ready to do something on it. But there's a blog, which it took me a while to authenticate, but it is authentic. And it's kind of a cheaply done blog that called everything that was going to happen, knew everything that was going to happen in the coup 12 days before the election. 12 days before the October 20th election, they piece by piece go through what's going to happen in the coup. And it now seems that it's because of these leaked audio tapes that have come out of the coup leaders setting this up, how they were going to delegitimize the election, how they were going to foment unrest, which they started before the election because they knew they would need that unrest going once the election came around. And they knew this was coming. You know, they knew this coup attempt was coming. It was planned in advance. And the U.S. has tried this in other countries, as in Venezuela, where they tried to say not a legit election, everyone needs to rise up, and so this tactic of saying that a legitimate election is not legitimate and then getting the people angry is fairly common for U.S.-backed coups. And the hilarious part of it is this election was way more legitimate than anything we have in the U.S.
Yeah, well, like any of the other ones, like Venezuela. You know, you had international election observers in Venezuela looking at the elections and saying, "Damn, these are legit,"
Yeah,
and yet we're over here like, "No, it's bullshit." But of course, this is just another example of our attempt to delegitimize elections that are democratic, that have to do with left politics, specifically in South America and Latin America, because that's our place, that's our playground, right?
We own it. Right?
We own it. Due to the Monroe Doctrine, so that's our place. So yeah, I mean, this is just another example of that.
Yeah,
and also, with regards to the planning of the coup attempt, let's not forget that there's, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, so you can pull me back, but
go for it.
The U.S. role in Bolivia has been, at this point, well documented. And this, if you're not familiar with the School of Americas, and I believe that actually that the actions that the School of Americas watch is happening this week. But
by the way, they changed the name to, I think it's something like My Little Pony, or is it Hippity Hoppity Happy Town? Or,
so the school
can't remember, but they did change the name because the School of the Americas brand was tarnished.
So the School of the Americas is now WINSEC, which
trying to make it not so comprehensible.
Well, so School of the Americas sounded a little too on the nose, I guess, because literally it was a school to train paramilitaries and right-wing fucking fascist coup leaders. Now it's called the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation.
I believe they've actually announced that they're changing their name to just to make it as hard as possible to tell people about it.
Yeah, so actually, as we record this, the close the School of the Americas, because they still call it that, because
Yeah.
The action outside of Fort Benning, which is where they train, Fort Benning, Georgia, was this past weekend, November 15th through 17th, and this is particularly current right now because they're confirmed 6 School of the Americas alumni that are like directly involved in the coup in Bolivia.
Not just involved, like coup leaders. These are the leaders. And the one I'm about to say, I don't think he's from School of the Americas, but he's awful in a whole other bunch of ways. One of the main coup leaders is Luis Fernando Camacho, who's a far-right fascist millionaire, part of the separatist area of Bolivia, which that separatist area has been supported by the U.S. for years now. They were trying to get them to basically wage a war against the rest of Bolivia and separate, because that is the area with many of the natural resources, and the U.S. kind of figured if we can at least take a chunk off of Bolivia away from Evo Morales. So this guy comes from this U.S.-supported far-right fascist millionaire sect of Bolivia. And then there's the Bolivian senator who's now claimed herself the president, Janine Áñez, who was, let's keep in mind, not elected to be president of Bolivia. See, a lot of people who want to say, like, well, I got an email from someone who said Evo Morales said he wanted to modernize the country, but it was not, that his modernization plans were not environmentally helpful. They were bad for the environment. And it's like, look, then go discuss that somewhere. And I don't like hurting the environment either, so I'll discuss that with you. That has nothing to do with whether there's just been a violent coup that has overthrown an election, forced a president to resign because his sister's house was burned down. I think I heard reports his brother was kidnapped for a while, and he saw indigenous mayors dragged out of their homes, being humiliated and beaten and stuff. So that it doesn't matter whether there was a policy you disagreed with.
Well, and here's the thing, and this is what it always circles back to this. None of your fucking business. Should like, Russia or China or anybody invade the U.S. because we do offshore drilling? I mean, some people might say yes. But the point is, we are an atrocious country with regards to everything that you might complain about a Bolivia about. Like, oh, it wasn't environmentally friendly. Oh, I'm sorry. Is the U.S. military the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the entire fucking world? Oh, I think so. And that's just the military. That's not counting our corporate malfeasance and our vast array of corporate destruction worldwide. I mean, the idea that it would be okay to overthrow a democratically elected government because you, somebody who doesn't fucking live in that country, has nothing to do with it, disagree with a policy, is fucking insane. The arrogance and the ignorance and the white supremacist bullshit that is behind that thinking is just it's just fucking mind-boggling.
And you're not kidding when you say white supremacists. This is a racist coup, by the way.
Absolutely. I mean, they all are, really.
Janine Áñez, who considers herself not indigenous, has said completely racist things, and Eleanor just handed me one of her tweets. I dream of a Bolivia free of indigenous satanic rituals. The city is not for the Indians. Send them to the high plains or to the Chaco. So she wants to just get rid of, possibly murder the indigenous in this country. You've
heard of the Trail of Tears? That's what that shit sounds like to me.
Right. That's what they want to do. She's evangelical who proclaimed it was a Christian nation again when she claimed the presidency for herself. And by the way, another point you need to know, the reason that she claimed the presidency for herself was because they forced not just Evo Morales, but all of these other high-level politicians to claim they had resigned in order to get down to the point that she could even claim she was president. So they kicked out all of these people from his party, and now they're not even letting his party enter into Congress, which is the reason his resignation can't even stand yet.
Yeah, because according to the Bolivian constitution, the Congress has to accept the resignation. If it doesn't accept the resignation, it's in limbo, which is exactly where the fuck it is right now, because his party, Mas, has not been allowed and has not dared enter back to even get to the fucking, like, sit down at the table and, like, try to figure out what to do with this. So the resignation isn't still not good. It's still not valid. So as of right now, everything according to not only, of course, international law, which why do we care about that? But Bolivia's actual fucking law, their constitution, dictates that resignation is not fucking valid as of right now. So she is not only completely sidestepping any sort of, like, what do you call it?
Protocol.
Like, in line to the succession. She's not only sidestepping that in order to take the presidency, but she's also completely sidestepping the fact that resignation is not fucking good.
Right. Doesn't even actually hold. And they can't have a vote on it because they won't let Congress in.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about this article by Jeb Sprague?
So I, well, it's not, the one that I pulled is not an article. It's a tweet.
Yes, he's taking bullet points from his article for the Gray Zone.
I see. So we're going to do Cliff's Note for you because that's what I put in the notes. I don't read articles. I like the bullet points.
Yeah, you're really not much of a reader.
Yeah,
I don't. You go for a few words at a time.
What you reading for?
For those of you who don't know, I'm kidding. She plows through books like they're pamphlets, and I don't really understand how it works. I'm convinced that for many years now she's been just faking that she's reading these books, so she just flips through them like Johnny Five in Short Circuit. Okay, I got it. No, you didn't just read that. That's not possible.
Really, I just have a copy of the Playboy magazine in there. You don't know it. So basically, like I mentioned,
for the articles.
I like to know what they're into.
Read it for the articles.
Kelly loves her afternoon martinis. So Jeb Sprague, as Lee mentioned, put out this tweet that basically, like I had mentioned, the 6 School of the Americas alumni that are directly involved in the Bolivian coup. And basically this article in this tweet is highlighting the U.S. role in this, because it's important to understand that this coup is not just happening in the vacuum of Bolivia, right? It is in the larger Americas theater that has to do with our direct intervention and aggression towards, again, as I mentioned, any nation in South America, particularly that is left and is interested in, self-determination, like you do. So
I'll get into more of those reasons in a second. Go ahead.
So I already mentioned the 6 School of the Americas alumni, and if you're not familiar with the School of the Americas, a great place to learn more is SOAW.org. That's schooloftheamericaswatch.org. They have outside of their actions that they do every year, they've got a lot of great information about former alumni that include, the paramilitary and coup leaders from Chile, Argentina, of course, Bolivia, and more. So also involved in this is a police leader behind the coup who served as president of the D.C. attaché group and worked closely with the FBI. Oh, yay, the FBI. And the leader of the Bolivian army was previously the military attaché at the embassy in D.C.
Right. So 2 of these top-level people that forced him to resign were connected to were attachés in D.C. with our military or FBI or police. And I think a lot of people are wondering, like, what exactly happened to them while they were here? Were they chosen because they were already part of this coup attempt, or were they here and basically our FBI got to them and said, here's a bunch of money, or we're going to harm your family, or whatever the fuck they do? Who knows how it works? But they basically went home, waited for the moment, and then said, you better step down, or we're flipping on you. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, but I don't know, you obviously, you did the homework, you read the article. What am I missing here?
Well, you're not missing anything, but you started to mention the reasons we would do this, and there's several that we wanted to bring down the Morales government of Bolivia. One thing is we just fucking hate indigenous people, but I think more important than that is he is, somewhat socialist, more socialist than our government. He decreased poverty by 50%. He increased literacy almost entirely. It went from illiteracy went from 20% in the country to 2%.
That's fucking amazing.
So he basically gave every poor person a little bit of money, enough money to live, and education. And we hate that shit, because if he shows that is successful in a country, then we start saying, hey, maybe our education should be free. Maybe our poor people shouldn't be so gut-wrenchingly poor.
So threat of the good example.
Threat of the good example, which we have 40 million people in poverty in this country, and 140 million on the brink, I think. He also nationalized the oil. Funny how we don't like that when you take a country's oil and stop giving 80 or 90% of the profits to a corporation or many corporations, and only a tiny bit of that trickles down to the people, and you say, hey, how about our oil revenue goes to the people, comes back to the people of Bolivia rather than going to corporations and overseas, millionaires and billionaires.
Which, to give you like kind of a parallel example here, if folks are familiar with Norway, you know that they have basically a fund, because Norway is a very oil-rich country, and they have a fund that basically takes profit from their oil endeavors and gives it back to the people. So it's a similar thing to what Bolivia had, or has still,
and Alaska.
And Alaska. So the parallel here is like, if we were to topple Norway's government because we hate the idea that they're giving money from their oil profits to their people. Now, you're probably hearing that and being like, that sounds ridiculous. Yes, it does. But again, this is like something that it's very important for folks to kind of like dismantle in their minds, because we just sort of accept, well, not everybody, but like a lot of people, because of their programming, think like, oh, well, that makes sense for these Latin American or South American nations because ... some socialist stupid fucking reason. But that actually doesn't, it doesn't hold true, because these nations are doing the same thing that like predominantly white nations are doing in the quote unquote global north, but for them it's okay. And so like you really have to, as Lee mentioned, understand the white supremacist and imperialist underpinnings, not even underpinnings, but like reasons for these coups to take place, is because we have this sense of ownership over the entire, like this entire hemisphere,
right.
Basically.
Colonialism has gone on for many years, and we won't say it publicly, but we still feel like we largely own these countries.
Right.
And two more reasons I have that we wanted to bring down Bolivia is he was part of the Pink Tide, which I think you mentioned earlier, which it was a move towards socialism and helping these the poorest people in these countries and nationalizing some of the larger resources. And it included, Venezuela and Cuba long ago, and AMLO in Mexico and many other countries. Some of them we've flipped, like Honduras and Uruguay is another one. Ecuador we kind of flipped without a coup. It basically seems like, the new president was far less left-wing than people thought. And anyway, our American government very much wanted to end the Pink Tide, make sure that this didn't keep growing, make sure that this threat of a good example didn't become a cancer of poor people getting less poor and resources going to the people rather than to the billionaires. And then, speaking of resources, the final reason, which I had no idea about until going through this research, was lithium. Mm-hmm. Bolivia has a large percentage of the world's lithium.
Yeah.
And we didn't care about that probably 20, 30 years ago. But now lithium is how our batteries work. It's how our phone batteries and our electric car batteries work. Lithium-ion batteries are expected to become a multi-billion dollar resource in these next few years. And so grabbing the resources of Bolivia, the lithium resources, is hugely important to us.
So there's again, like, and this is one of those things that the people have talked about. Yes, mining lithium is not environmentally friendly. So here's what you would do if you didn't have your head up the the empire's ass. You'd say, hey, I
Excuse
wonder
me, ours.
I wonder if there's a way to use technology to not only figure out a way to potentially make something out like of batteries without using lithium so as to not have to mine it and thereby destroy the environment in the hopes of getting lithium, but also how do we recycle batteries, because that's a huge issue. And there have been recent reports with the whole battery craze, like, oh, everything's running off of, you don't have to use gas anymore, great, okay, but these batteries die and then they end up in fucking landfills leaching fucking acid and all kinds of chemicals. So we really need to find a better way to recycle batteries.
It's so tough to even find a place to leave the batteries. Because you'll see, there'll be an office building where they're like, we take battery recycling, and then you're like, all right, I got to get all my batteries I've been saving up for the past 2 years. I got to get them, and I got to get them to this office. Why is it such a rare thing that you can find a place to deliver the batteries? It's protected by a gnome who's like, and answer me these questions 3.
Well, and I also think, I think the other problem is that, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but there's the vast majority of shit that you put in a recycling bin never is recycled.
I think we've covered that before.
I'm not saying you shouldn't recycle. I'm saying that we need to get better practices when it comes to recycling.
And if we're raining on your parade, that might be a good thing because the confetti is mainly made of plastic, and a lot of it, and it doesn't get recycled, it just goes down the drain. It's terrible.
Yeah, fuck confetti. Don't use that shit. So biodegradable glitter, folks. But yeah, so this is the lithium argument is an argument that's being used as in that's not environmentally friendly. That's an argument that's being used by pro-coup people as an excuse. But again, as I mentioned earlier, that even gives you one shit bit of right to topple a democratically elected government because you don't agree with their environmental policy. Meanwhile, I'm assuming that you're sitting in the country that is slashing environmental regulations, going at them like it's a fucking piñata. And meanwhile, I guess, do you think that we should topple our government? Because if so, call me.
Call me. When I first heard that they had large lithium reserves, I thought we needed them because we're all going crackpot crazy. And I forgot about the batteries. I thought we just needed lithium to take.
What is lithium for again?
It's a drug for mental illness.
I see.
That was the joke.
That a cry for help?
That was the joke. That was a joke and a cry for help. Sometimes they're one and the same.
Yeah, the sad clown thing, right? The tortured comedian.
If I had confetti, I'd dump it on you right now.
No.
All right, so we've gone through a lot of bad news about Bolivia. Well, here's the tiny lithium lining to this cloud.
That sounds disgusting.
That Morales has technically not actually resigned yet because it hasn't been approved by Congress. And there's still a tiny chance, although most people I hear from that know more than me think it's very unlikely. There's still a tiny chance that without Congress accepting his resignation, he could come back if the protests grow large enough. The indigenous are standing up in that country. Unfortunately, this also tends to result in massacres because you have large numbers of people standing up against a tiny number of people with guns.
Right, and there have been also calls to go on strike in support of Morales and against the U.S.-backed imperialist coup. I don't believe as of today, Monday, November 18th, as we record this, that these strikes have materialized. But again, people are out in the streets in support of Morales, particularly in the indigenous populations. So as this continues to progress, this is definitely something that you'll want to keep an eye on.
Like a lithium ion? I had to. It was right there.
Okay. Anyway, you sit with that for a minute. So basically... But this, again, shows who you have on the side of Morales. It's the largest, Bolivia's main federation of worker unions that have come out and said, what the fuck? This is not okay. We're going to go on strike. And this just once again shows that when, a country helps its workers, when a country helps the indigenous population, the most marginalized and oppressed historically, they immediately and automatically have a target on their back from the U.S. empire.
Well, and I will give you one more bit of good news here while we're on the topic of U.S.-backed coups, is we tried to overthrow Venezuela again this past weekend, and it failed so miserably
So amazing.
that almost no one knows about it. Like, it was a non-event. Pompeo and Mike Pence and, all the others that are these fucking coup masters, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, were tweeting about, Venezuela's rising up, the generals are switching sides, and Juan Guaido, the self-proclaimed president who does not have any presidential powers of Venezuela, he had been saying that November 16th would be the day and that the military would switch. And so they did hold a protest, but it was a tiny percentage of the initial coup attempt protests that were still small compared to the pro-Maduro protests and marches. But it was, a couple hundred people showed up, and as far as we can tell, no military switched and sides.
It's like a Buttigieg rally.
Yeah,
a couple hundred people.
A couple hundred people.
Not much fanfare.
Kind of confused, aren't sure why they're there.
No black people.
They thought there'd been talk of free candy, but they show up, and anyway, it was just so pathetic that I didn't even hear about it until today. Most people didn't hear anything about it. Even CNN, that has been fucking trying so hard to. CNN has spent their past fucking several months pushing so hard for Venezuelan coup and just a Joe Biden nomination. And they're just their shoulders are tired. They're exhausted because they've been pushing this shit down our throats. And I remember one report that was just CNN in Venezuela talking about, they found some kids that were in eating out of the garbage, and they were like, many people are forced to eat out of the garbage. When in fact, Venezuela has far less extreme poverty, at least before we crush their economy, than we do, because they actually take care of their poor and their homeless. But
and they'd have, as you noted, they'd have a lot less of a problem with poverty if we'd stop waging economic warfare on them. But there's one thing, this comparison between Venezuela and Bolivia. There's an interesting point here, because with regards to the military flipping, in Bolivia, the military they were cutting off the indigenous flag off of their uniforms, and a lot of people have asked, well, why did they flip in Bolivia, not in Venezuela? And there's a lot of the history is quite different in terms of who trained the Bolivian military, where their loyalties lie, but also there's another aspect here. Venezuela, so Chavez was a military man, and Maduro has continued with a lot of Chavez's ideas, and one of those is the militia. So there's a Venezuelan militia that is 2 million plus people strong, which is larger than the entire U.S. military in terms of people power. And that's not the military. This is outside of the military. There's a militia that's more than 2 million people strong. And so even hypothetically, if the military were to flip in Venezuela, which it's obviously not, even if it did, it would have to contend with 2 million plus people in the militia. And this is something that Bolivia does not have. It doesn't have a standing militia. And this, and I talked about this a little bit in my episode last week, this idea of discussing and coming to terms with the question of quote unquote violence and self-defense. And this idea that the oppressed always have the right to self-defense, and the idea of having a militia, for instance, in Venezuela as a way to protect themselves from not just imperial coups, but also localized right-wing fascistic uprisings. If Guaido were to try to, bring a bunch of people in and take over, then the militia would be there to stand up against it. So it raises this question of having people ready to stand up in defense of their communities and of their people. And, that's something that you definitely see at play in Venezuela.
Yeah, the Venezuela has made sure to keep their military happy and their generals happy, and made inroads on that front so that they couldn't just be taken down so easily by a U.S. coup. But anyway, these things are all developing, and we will try and keep you updated as they go. And at least the Venezuelan one is a positive note for that country.
Indeed, it is. So I kind of wanted to share something that's in the absurdist column. Not that everything else we've talked about isn't absurd, but this is one of those things that if you were to write it into like a Hollywood film, you'd think, oh God, that's so ridiculous. That's just that. But no, stranger than fiction. This actually fucking happened. So Venice, you might have heard, is flooding. And this is becoming a more and more frequent occurrence. If you haven't been there, I suggest that you go before it disappears into the water. But so this happened just as it was flooding, just like as the waters were rising. Venice City Council voted down a climate crisis amendment. And then a few minutes later, that room was underwater. I'm not fucking kidding.
Meaning, as they walked to this council meeting, they were probably walking through floodwaters to vote down climate change.
Or it flooded like just as it, like the way that I see it is that apparently I can't remember the names of the people, but when the Dust Bowl was happening around the Great Depression in the United States, there was a debate happening in Congress about a bill to address this and to address like farming practices and everything and relief. And the members of Congress were like, fuck it, basically like out of sight, out of mind, who gives a shit? And there was a member of Congress that was arguing on the floor to help and to actually do something about this and be proactive. And one of his aides ran up as he was speaking and whispered in his ear, "Keep talking." And he didn't really know what was going on at the time. But what was happening is that, and if you don't know geography, the Dust Bowl was not in DC. It was
right.
It was nowhere near. But because it was so extreme, and one of the main reasons for the Dust Bowl is that we had completely farmed incorrectly and basically killed the topsoil.
Yeah, farmed it to death.
Which means that like basically not only were foods completely devoid of nutrients, but you also couldn't plant because the topsoil is where you have like the bulk of your biodiversity, and it's where your vegetables and your produce gets its life from. So if you've killed the topsoil, you've killed the fucking plants.
Now we're doing the same thing, but with Monsanto chemicals, so it's slightly different, but.
We've advanced the killing of the topsoil.
The
But so that was a main impetus for the Dust Bowl. And so basically this was so massive and so far reaching and omnipresent that the dust reached DC. And so this aide runs up to the member of Congress as he's speaking to say, "Keep talking," because the dust was just about to reach. And it did reach. And the dust fucking blew in to the Capitol. And then it was one of the quickest turnovers in terms of signing something into law ever. And it was signed into law. And like, this is what that reminds me of, except it wasn't signed. So literally they're like,
no, they did
I
not
don't know
change
if
their
I give a
mind.
shit about this. Oh shit, my feet are wet. Also, fuck climate change.
And you can, if you Google this online, you will find images of that council chambers flooded. And
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
you also talk about the meme you showed me of the women with their shopping bags.
Oh my God.
The Versace shopping bags.
It was Louis Vuitton.
Was it?
Thank you. I don't fucking know. It was one of those shops that you see like on Fifth Avenue that you need to like pay like a $20 door charge just to fucking walk in, and everything like even a tank top's $500. But so there was an image of these two women wading through waist deep water, carrying Louis Vuitton bags, like shopping bags. And the meme was basically like saying that, it's easier to picture the end of the world than it is to picture the end of capitalism. And that's not a bright, uplifting note, but it's just like so indicative. It's like, really? you went fucking shopping. And like, this is not even, I'm not even going to get into the quagmire of like how fucking destructive the fashion industry is environmentally, because holy shit it is. But it's like, you couldn't even be bothered to take a minute and be like, what the fuck is going on with our planet? You were like, I got to have some new shoes. This will not stand.
Well, you are going to need new shoes. That is true. Absolutely. Your Louis Vuitton is not doing, is that a shoe maker? I don't know. Is not doing well.
I don't know. They make shoes, I think.
Yeah, they're called galoshes. The galosh stocks are through the roof.
You know what? Actually, you don't even have to. You just need to buy duct tape and wrap your existing shoes in duct tape.
Oh, there you go. Duct tape chic.
You know? Or, hey, recycle, find some old tires and cut off the rubber and just wrap the rubber.
I have to vote against it. I have to veto that idea. I bought Adbusters. For some odd reason, the only thing Adbusters sells, because they're anti-selling, obviously, is and anti-ads, is their shoes. They sell Adbusters shoes that are made out of old fabric and old tires. And so the bottom of the shoe is just tire, and the top of the shoe is like some sort of old crappy fabric. And I like the way they look, because it looked like you had sewn together nonsense and put it on your feet. But turned out that tire rubber is not really absorbent, and my back was killing me. So.
Oh, absorbent in that sense.
In that sense.
Yeah, well, you might need to add some Dr. Scholl's in there.
Because I'm sorry, but I have evolved for regular shoes. For many years, I've evolved for normal shoes.
Yeah, no, but you can make insoles also out of the rubber.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. For those of you that can't see this, which is everyone, she's making hand motions that don't make any sense.
There's the insole. It's the insole.
There's insole that looks like a dolphin jumping, and I don't know why that means insole.
Well, I have high arches, so I needed like a lot of insole support. I basically never wear shoes without insoles, and if I do, like,
you told me you went barefoot through all of college.
Okay, first of all, I was in college for a year, so all of college is not really that fucking long. And second of all, I was 17, so I don't think it fucking counts. When you're 17, you can do anything, and your body's like, I'm sorry, what?
Your body's like, I'll make it work.
Again. But no, now I'm in my 30s, and my body's like, I'm sorry, no, I don't like when you sit on that chair. Could you sit on the cushy chair?
Yeah.
We want the cushy chair.
True.
So yeah, it's a completely different ballgame now.
That's very true. I could sit on like a stone tablet for 14 hours straight. Yeah. Now I'm in a plane and it's a little tight for a couple hours, and I'm like, I will die before I go through this again. I cannot persevere. All right. Well, I think that's our show. I don't know why we ended on that note, but we must.
I think the moral of the story is get some duct tape and some old tires.
That's the moral of every story, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
We are going over to patreon.com/common-censor to do a few more minutes. If you want to join us there, please do. That's Patreon, patreon.com/common-censor. Thank you to all you who have become donors or patrons recently. This show has no ads except for the one we just did for Louis Vuitton and the one for
Was
nothing.
that an ad for? I feel like that was an ad against. Like,
I
fuck
know.
you for selling things while the planet's burning.
I'm kidding. We have no ads. You guys keep this show going. We are completely created by and for you. So please come join us over there. And yeah, I'll have a link up to my new book on my website soon.
We'll include it in the show notes.
And in the show notes.
And you can find all of my shit at artkillingapathy.com. And until next time, act out.
Keep fighting.